The old streets of Verona echoed with memories, cobbled alleys worn smooth by centuries of love, betrayal, and whispered promises. It was in one of these narrow corridors, tucked behind a forgotten bell tower, that Clara lived. She was a painter, quiet, deliberate, and known for her hauntingly vivid portraits. Her small studio overlooked the Piazza della Luna, a place that basked in golden light during the day and drowned in silver shadows at night. Those shadows, she often said, had more truth than the sunlit facades people wore. Clara had once loved a man named Marco. They met on a rainy afternoon when she had dropped her sketchbook in the square and he, a passing architect, had rescued it before the wind could claim it. He had smiled, an easy, warm smile that settled deep into her soul. Their days quickly intertwined, nights stretching into whispered dreams and plans drawn across rumpled sheets. But even as Clara painted him again and again, something felt incomplete, not in his presence, but in his absence. He was kind, thoughtful, but she began to notice strange inconsistencies. A call that went unanswered, a scent on his coat that wasn't hers, an unfamiliar key tucked in his bag. The shadows began to whisper. She saw them dance oddly on his face as he spoke. Shadows never lie. Her grandmother used to say, "Light might blind you, but shadows tell the story." One evening, Clara painted Marco for the last time. He had fallen asleep on her studio couch, exhausted from a business trip to Florence. The soft lamplight carved angles on his cheekbones, but the shadows around his eyes were deep and restless. She painted him faithfully, except for one detail. In the background of the canvas, she painted another figure, a woman, blurry and distant, half hidden in darkness, the kind of presence the heart feels before the mind admits. Weeks passed. Marco drifted further, always with excuses. Clara said nothing, only painted, portrait after portrait, but each one darker than the last. His eyes grew hollow in them. His smiles became brittle, almost sinister. Then one morning, she received a letter, anonymous and signed. "He isn't yours alone." He never was. Inside was a photo. Marco in Florence, arm around a woman with green eyes, a silver locket in her hand, one Clara had once worn before it vanished mysteriously. The betrayal didn't sting, not as much as the realization that she had known, that her silence had let the shadows fester. Her love had been real. His hadn't, but the shadows had warned her. That night, she didn't sleep. She took every painting of Marco, stacked them high in the courtyard, and set them ablaze. As the fire roared, flames devouring canvas and lies alike, neighbors gathered, murmuring questions she ignored. But one man watched silently, a stranger with a scar under his left eye, holding a camera slung casually over his shoulder. He approached as the last painting crumbled to ash. "You see what most people ignore," he said. "Shadows don't lie." Clara looked up, eyes reflecting the firelight. "And neither will I," he added. It began again differently, with fewer promises, with no illusions. She would never forget Marco. But she had learned to listen, to the silence, to her instincts, to the unfaithful shadows that had tried to protect her all along. And this time, she walked with them, eyes wide open. The stranger's name was Elias. He had been in Verona only a month, a photographer commissioned to capture the essence of a forgotten city. But Elias wasn't interested in tourist spots or sunny cafes. He roamed at twilight, seeking the dim corners, the peeling paint, the secrets buried in bricks and silence. That night, as Clara's flames licked the sky, he had found what he'd been searching for. Not just a moment, but a story. Clara didn't invite him in immediately. She didn't offer coffee or share stories of heartbreak. But over the days that followed, their paths kept crossing. Once at the corner market, again near the old bridge where lovers left locks of promise, and later outside the bookstore, where Clara found herself drawn to volumes on shadow puppetry and chiaroscuro. He never pressed. He watched, quietly capturing the things most people missed, how her fingers hovered before touching a canvas, the way she paused before mixing color, the glances she gave her own reflection like she was searching for something she couldn't name. One evening, she found an envelope slipped under her studio door. No words, only photographs. One was of her, standing in the orange light of the market, staring at a bowl of blood oranges, another of her burned paintings, the smoke curling like ghosts into the sky. The third, the most arresting, was of Clara staring out her studio window, lost in thought, her shadow cast long on the wall behind her. Except in the photograph, her shadow wasn't alone. A second shadow stood behind her, distinct, unmistakable, though no one had been there that night. Clara's breath caught. She studied the photo for hours, checked the studio. Nothing. She called Elias. When he arrived, he didn't look surprised. "I thought you might see it," he said quietly. "What is it?" "I don't know, but your shadows, they tell truths others bury." They sat in silence. The photo lay between them like a confession neither fully understood. "I used to believe Marco's lies," she whispered, "but I saw it before he ever told me. In the shadows, in the way they didn't match his smile." Elias nodded. "Sometimes our shadows see who we are before we do." She looked at him. "So whose is the second one?" He hesitated. "I think it's the version of you that didn't burn the paintings. The one that still clings to what you thought was love." Clara flinched. She wanted to deny it, but he was right. She still dreamed of Marco, sometimes. Not of what was, but what could have been. The ghost of a life imagined. That, too, left a shadow. But over time, something shifted. Clara began painting again. Not portraits. Never again faces that lied. Instead, she painted silhouettes, motion, feelings trapped in light and dark. She painted shadows that danced and fought, embraced and betrayed. Her work grew raw and magnetic. Critics called it emotion without face. Galleries began to call, and Elias stayed, not as a muse, not as a lover at first, but as someone who understood. He showed her the beauty of stillness, the stories hidden in pause. Sometimes he would photograph her canvases. Sometimes he would sit, camera untouched, just watching. Months passed. One night, while reviewing her newest piece, a vast mural of intertwined shadows pulling each other apart and then back together, Clara spoke. "I think I'm ready to forgive him," she said. Elias looked at the painting. "Why?" "Because if I don't, his shadow will keep following me." She turned to him. "And I want to walk beside someone who casts his own shadow, not someone who left it behind." This time, she reached for him, not with trembling hesitation, but with clarity. The shadows on the wall behind them intertwined gently, no longer unfaithful, no longer lying, simply honest, and finally, hers. Clara's fingers slid into Elias's, and for a long time neither spoke. There was no rush, no surge of fireworks, only a quiet knowing, like the moment just before dawn when the world exhales. The next morning, Clara returned to mural and added something new, a thin beam of light breaking through the tangle of shadows, subtle but unmistakable. Elias watched her work from across the room, camera idle in his lap, the lens cap still on. He didn't need to capture her anymore. He was simply there. But healing doesn't come without haunting. It started small. Clara would sometimes wake with the sensation that someone had just left the room. Her brushes would be out of place. A half-squeezed tube of ochre left open on the table when she knew, was certain she hadn't used it. Then came the whisper, soft, like a breath slipping through a crack in the window. Always the same. "Forgive me." At first, Clara dismissed it as memory, a ghost her guilt had conjured. But one night, she followed the sound down to the studio, barefoot and half asleep, and found something impossible. A fresh canvas on her easel, blank just the day before, now bore the outline of Marco's face. Not a full painting, but a shadow of one, rough, faint, familiar. Elias arrived minutes later, called by her panic. He studied the painting, then her. "I didn't paint this," Clara said. "I believe you." He stepped closer, inspecting the edges. This isn't oil or acrylic. It's burnt, as if the image was seared into the canvas. Clara wrapped her arms around herself. Why can't he let go? Elias didn't answer right away. Maybe because part of you hasn't. The silence that followed wasn't angry or defensive. It was heavy with truth. Clara stared at the canvas, her heart torn between fear and something else. Not love. Not anymore. Recognition. "You're right," she whispered. "I forgave him with words, not with soul." That night, Clara sat alone in the studio, the ghost painting of Marco facing her like a question. She lit a single candle and pulled out her oldest journal, the one filled with sketches of him, notes about their early days, letters she never sent. One by one, she read them aloud, her voice trembling, her tears steady. Then she burned each page in the candle's flame, watching the paper curl and blacken and vanish. When the final ember died, she turned the canvas and painted over it, not with white, not to erase, but with deep, soothing blue, the kind of blue found in the hour just before night ends, the color of release. That was the last night the whisper came. Years passed. Clara's studio grew, as did her reputation. She became known not just for her paintings, but for her story of light, shadow, and truth. She held exhibitions titled The Unfaithful Shadows, each showcasing the journey from betrayal to wholeness. Elias remained at her side, not as a crutch, not as a savior, but as a partner. He photographed her work, traveled with her, built a life beside hers without trying to define it. One spring, they married beneath an ivy-covered arch in the courtyard where Clara had once burned her past. There were no grand speeches, only vows whispered beneath a sky streaked with silver shadows and golden promise. That night, Clara stood before a blank canvas. For the first time in years, no ghost stirred, no whispers, no lingering doubts. Just her hand, her brush, and shadow cast by love that didn't lie. She dipped her brush in gold and began again. The brush moved gently, almost reverently, across the canvas. Clara no longer painted out of pain or memory, but from a place of peace. Every stroke felt like a quiet breath. Every color a reminder that healing wasn't forgetting. It was remembering without breaking. Elias stood at the doorway, watching her. He didn't say a word. He never interrupted when she was like this, whole, weightless, lost in creation. And she knew he was there. She always knew. Hours passed. When the painting was finished, she stepped back. It was unlike anything she had ever done before. Light and shadow intertwined, not in conflict, but in dance. A single silhouette stood in the center, arms open, as though welcoming the past, the present, and whatever came next. Clara signed her name in the corner. Then, for the first time, added something new beneath it. Clara and Elias. She turned to him, her smile soft but sure. "It's done," she said. And it was. The grief, the betrayal, the ghost of Marco's shadow, all of it had finally passed. Elias crossed the room and took her hand. Outside, the Verona night glowed with stars. Shadows stretched long across the piazza, but Clara no longer feared them. They were no longer unfaithful. They simply were. And as she turned out the studio light, letting the night embrace their silhouettes on the wall, she whispered to the dark, "Thank you for staying, even when I didn't."